What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I want to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that I see when people are fishing a drop shot. It is one of the greatest techniques ever designed and invented. I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to break down how to fix the mistakes that you're making with a drop shot so you can catch more big smallmouth and big finesse fish today. Alright, so let's talk about the first mistake that I see people making when they're fishing a drop shot. Oftentimes when people rig a bait nose hook, they just thread it right through like this. Right, they poke it right through just like that, as you can see there. But then, as you can see, that bait is free to do whatever it wants on that hook. So when you're nose rigging a bait, what you want to do is you want to insert that hook like this. So you can see, let me get that zoomed in there. You can see that hook is not actually coming straight through the nose. I'm going to go behind the nose and come forward like this. So then you can see that actually positions that on there, and that bait can only roll a little bit. It can't actually fall back and forth, so it keeps that bait perfectly horizontal when it falls in the water. And then when a fish eats it, you can see when you pull on it, that hook point is going to come right through there again, and you're going to hook every one of your fish right in the roof of the mouth, and that is the beautiful part of it. But this helps keep that bait straight and in line, and it'll help you get more bites. So let's talk about the second mistake that I see people make. So the second mistake that I see people make most often is fishing the wrong weight. Now there's three different weights out there. There's a cylinder weight, there's a ball weight, and then there's a mix, which is the teardrop weight. So the cylinder weight is best for around grass. It is best for around grass because it is that thin profile and it slides nice and easy through that grass. A ball weight is good for when you're fishing isolated patches of rock or gravel or sand especially. And a teardrop weight is kind of a good one for in the middle. You know that those two have that bulkier profile that allows them to not get caught in rock, whereas the cylinder weight, being so thin, will get wedged in those crevices and you'll break off almost every single time if you continue to fish that around rock. That will get you screwed over and you'll lose a lot of money in weights really fast. You'll get really frustrated and you won't catch as many fish because you'll be breaking off weights left and right. So that is the second mistake that I see. Let's dive into the third mistake that I see people make all the time. So the third mistake that I see people make most often is having their leader length all jacked up. You know, people rig a drop shot and they think they need a 15, 25, 30-inch leader. You'll see leaders like this big, and that's not what you need. My standard go-to leader is going to be about 12 to 15 inches, you know, anywhere from about that to that. And the beauty of that is you want that bait to be elevated off the bottom to where those fish can see it a little bit, and enough where you can actually add movement to that bait without moving it. But you don't want it to be super long. The only time you'd want it to be super long is if you're targeting those fish suspended off the bottom that far. So, and the reason that leader length is so important is because when you cast it, you know, your leader length might be 12 inches, but when you cast it, if you cast a long distance, your bait is now going to be here because you're dragging it across the bottom. So if you're making long casts, your leader length needs to be longer because you need to keep that bait off the bottom further. So if your bait is down here, or your weight is down here, and you have your 20-inch leader, you know, the further cast you make, the more that's going to be pulling your bait toward the bottom. If you're straight dropping on them, you can get away with a lot shorter leader because it's straight up and down. But the further away you cast, the longer your leader has to be to keep that bait off the bottom. So keep that in mind when you're rigging a leader, because that can be the difference between catching a bunch of fish and snagging on the bottom every single time. Now let's dive into tip number 4. So the mistake number 4 that I see people make most often is overworking a bait. Now, a drop shot is a phenomenal tool for the reason that you can hold it in one spot and not have to move it without having to move it horizontally, but still being able to move it vertically. But what I see people most often do is they cast it out there and they want to sit there and they want to shake it and they want to get that bait moving all over the place and acting erratic. And in some situations that might work, but most oftentimes that's not what you want to do. Most oftentimes you want to cast it out and you want to use real subtle motions because you want that bait just down there, just pulsating. You know, if you're bed fishing or whatever, you can let it just fall to the bottom. Use that natural fall to your advantage because that is the beauty of it. You can let that bait just flutter, then you can pick it up and let it feather up, let it fall back down. Use the natural movement of the bait and the weight in the bait to allow you to catch more fish. You know, it's a subtle presentation. It's a finesse presentation. If you're out there shaking it all the time, oftentimes you end up scaring fish away. You know, so when that bait first hits the bottom, what I'm going to let that do is when I make a cast, it hits the bottom, I'm going to give it slack so that bait hits the bottom, and I want it to fall, because if there's any fish in the area, they're going to come over to investigate. And if you cast it out there and start shaking it as soon as it hits the bottom, you're going to spook them. But if you let it hit the bottom, let it fall nice and slow, and then just kind of hop it up a little bit, those fish will suck it right up every time. So try to not overwork your bait. You know, you have to think about every little movement you make and how elevated that's going to be, or how exponentially different that's going to be at your bait. So keep that in mind. So let's dive into mistake number 5, which might be one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make on a daily basis when they're using a drop shot. So the last mistake that I see people make most often is using the wrong gear for drop shotting. I see them using the wrong hooks, I see them using the wrong rods, and I see them using the wrong reels. So let's break down all 3 of those real quick. The right hooks, there's 2 different kinds. You have your nose hooks, your small hooks, and you have your bigger worm hooks. So the 2 that I like is an owner mosquito hook, and I like that VMC Finesse Nico hook, or the owner cover shot. And I'm going to use that when I'm Texas rigging a worm, or if I'm fishing a worm in general. And I'm going to use this owner mosquito hook when I'm fishing my finesse baits for smallmouth, you know, my smaller baits. The biggest thing is noticing the gap from that hook point to the shank right there. You want something with a wide gap that's going to really penetrate through the roof of their mouth, and you get a good hookup percentage. The next thing I see people doing is using too stiff of a rod. You see these guys want to jack these fish, but with a broomstick of a rod, those fish, especially those smallmouth, come up and they start shaking. You're either going to break them off, you're going to throw the hook because it's a small hook, you're using light line, finesse hooks, so you're going to lose those fish. You want a softer rod that you can really load that fish up with it. You know, you feel them eat it, reel down, let that rod load up a little bit, lean on them. You get a good hookup, and you get some cushion when you're fighting that fish when they're doing all kinds of crazy things. The next thing I see people doing wrong is the reel. They want to use like a 2500 series reel. And when you're using a bait that you're having to move really slow, like a finesse bait, you want a higher gear ratio reel, something with a bigger diameter spool to pick up more line, because oftentimes they'll eat it and do goofy things with it and run at you, and it leaves you struggling to pick up the amount of line that they've taken. And then you end up missing fish because you don't get as good of a hook set. So that can be some of the frustration when it comes to fishing a drop shot. So hopefully these tips helped you guys. If you guys liked the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I have videos coming out every Tuesday and Friday. That way you guys can keep up at 7 p.m. If you guys like this video, be sure to check out this video I'm going to have linked up here, linking you to my Ned Rig tips. A Ned Rig is also a phenomenal finesse bait that I think you guys are really going to need these tips to help you guys catch more finesse fish. It is probably one of the best baits out there, one of my favorite baits. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I hope y'all take care.